I think Halloween's about fun, about lights, laughter, candy, and fake ghosts. But every mask hides a real face, and some of those faces have never come off. What you're about to hear are not stories. They re-records of real things that happened, things buried so deep in police reports and family secrets that most people refuse to talk about them. So before we start, take 1 second and subscribe to Frightline Stories, because after this night, you'll never see Halloween the same way again. It started on a quiet October evening in a town you wouldn't even find interesting, a place so normal that evil had no business being there. Tyler Moore had moved into the house at the edge of Hollow Creek 6 months earlier, the kind of house where every floorboard remembers the last person who lived there. He was 28, a contractor, newly single after a brutal breakup that left him half alive and half desperate to prove he could start over. The house was old, but cheap. It sat at the end of a long road that vanished into a stretch of dying woods. On Halloween morning, he woke to the sound of laughter outside. Kids testing costumes, parents decorating porches, and for the first time in months, he felt almost human again. He told himself he'd hand out candy, maybe have a beer or two, pretend the world was fine. But that night, when the trick-or-treaters started coming, something about the air felt wrong. The fog came early, heavy and cold, rolling off the creek like breath from something massive. The moon was sharp, white, too bright. Tyler sat on his porch with a bucket of candy, wrapped in an old hoodie, music low on his phone. Kids came in waves, giggling, shouting, "Trick or treat!" and running off with handfuls of chocolate. But then came one, small, quiet, alone, a boy in a faded scarecrow costume. The mask was cheap burlap with button eyes and a stitched smile. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, hand open. "Hey, nice costume," Tyler said. The boy didn't move. Tyler hesitated, dropped 2 candy bars into the bucket. The boy turned his head slightly, not in thanks, not even like he'd heard, just a slow, unnatural tilt. Then he walked away, footsteps soft on the leaves. A few seconds later, Tyler looked up again. The street was empty. The fog had thickened, swallowing the last of the neighborhood lights. Then his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, his house, taken from the sidewalk. In the frame, standing by the mailbox, was the boy in the scarecrow costume, staring directly at the camera. The message said, "Nice house." Tyler froze. His heart thudded once, hard. He looked out at the road, nothing but fog. He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. The night grew still. Finally, he stood up, went down the porch steps, flashlight in hand. The street was silent. He checked the mailbox, nothing. Then, from somewhere deeper in the fog, a laugh, small, childlike, echoing. He spun toward it, light cutting through gray, nothing there. But when he turned back, his front door was open. Slowly, he walked up the steps again, gun tucked in the back of his jeans now, every muscle ready to bolt. Inside, the air felt colder. The TV was on static. He hadn't turned it on. The candy bowl lay on the floor, spilled. Then, behind him, the faint sound of boots on the porch. He swung around, flashlight shaking. Nothing. Just fog crawling through the open doorway. He closed it, locked it twice, backed away. Then the phone buzzed again. Another picture. This one from inside the house, his living room, taken from behind the couch. His heart stopped. He hadn't seen anyone. He ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife he had, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. No service. Not even a bar. He whispered, "Who's there?" Then he heard it, soft scratching from upstairs. Slow, rhythmic, like something dragging across wood. He started up the steps, one creak at a time, flashlight beam trembling over the walls. The scratching grew louder, closer, until he reached the second floor. The hall was empty except for the open door at the end, the spare bedroom. He stepped closer. The scratching stopped. Silence. He pushed the door open, light sweeping across the floor. And there, in the corner, stood the scarecrow boy. Still. Silent. But the mask, it was different now. The stitched smile had been torn open, and underneath there was no face at all. just black hollow space. The figure took a step forward, and every light in the house went out at once. Tyler screamed, stumbled backward, falling down the stairs. The phone hit the ground, shattering. The front door slammed shut on its own. He scrambled to his feet in total darkness. Then, a whisper right behind his ear. "Nice house." He spun around, knife slashing air, but hit nothing. A hand, cold small, brushed his neck. He ran. Threw himself at the door, shoulder first. It burst open, and he tumbled out into the yard, gasping, bleeding from the elbow. The fog had lifted. The street was normal again. Porch lights flickered softly down the row. He looked back. The door swung open slowly, like someone was watching him leave. Tyler packed his truck the next morning. Didn't wait for sunrise. Just left. Later, when he went through his phone data to show the police, they found no messages, no photos, no evidence of a number or any calls that night. But one image remained in his gallery, corrupted, half static. In it, you could make out the shape of a figure in burlap standing by his stairs, with a shadow behind it, a man's outline matching his height exactly. Tyler moved 3 states away, never celebrated Halloween again. But last year, on October 31st, he woke to a package on his new porch. No return address. Inside, wrapped in newspaper, was a small button. The same kind sewn into the scarecrow's eyes. 2 years later, and 2,000 miles away, Halloween returned to another town where no one believed in ghosts, but everyone locked their doors anyway. This one happened to a woman named Claire, a 34-year-old nurse from Ohio, who loved Halloween enough to decorate weeks in advance. Paper bats, fake cobwebs, the smell of cinnamon candles filling her small house. She lived alone, and after a long double shift at the hospital, she was ready for nothing more than wine and a horror movie marathon. Outside, the wind played with the last brown leaves on her lawn, and children's laughter faded street by street as the night grew deeper. By 9, the neighborhood was quiet. Claire dimmed her lights, poured herself a second glass of wine, and started The Shining. Somewhere between Jack's first "Here's Johnny" and the pounding of the typewriter, her doorbell rang. She froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. It was late for trick-or-treaters, but she smiled anyway and went to the door. Through the people, nothing but black. The porch light was still on, but no one stood there. She opened the door just an inch, enough to peek out. No kids, no footsteps. Only an envelope on the welcome mat. It was thick white, sealed with red wax, old-fashioned. Her name was written in cursive on the front, Claire. She frowned, picked it up, and turned it over. No return address, just a wax seal pressed with something like a skull. Inside was a letter printed, not handwritten. "We thank you for your kindness. The child has found peace." No signature, no date, no meaning. She laughed nervously, thinking it must be a prank, maybe from the neighbors. She tossed it onto the counter and went back to the couch, but her movie had stopped. The TV screen was frozen on static. She reached for the remote, but before she touched it, the static changed. A faint image flickered through, like someone's face inches from the camera. A child's face, pale, eyes blacked out by shadow. Then, whispering, soft, like breath against the speaker. "Thank you, Claire." Her wine glass shattered on the floor. She backed away, heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. The image vanished. The screen went black. She turned off the TV, switched on every light in the house, and told herself it was some horror movie glitch, something she'd accidentally queued up. She even laughed weakly, trying to shake off the chill. But when she turned around, the envelope was gone. She stood there, confused, scanning the counter. Gone. Completely. She didn't even hear the door open or close. But a cold draft brushed the back of her neck, and she knew someone else was in the house. She called out, "Hello?" and got nothing back, just silence and the faint ticking of her kitchen clock. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the cops, when she saw another text pop up from an unknown number. A photo of her living room, taken from behind her. She turned instantly, heart in her throat, but no one was there. Just the faint smell of earth, damp, rotting, like something dug up after rain. She dialed 911. The line connected, but all she heard was whispering, not words, just breath. She ran to the front door, yanked it open, and stopped cold. On the porch stood a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, dressed in a torn white nightgown, her hair tangled, skin gray with dirt, barefoot. Her eyes, wide, empty, stared straight through Claire. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Claire whispered, voice shaking. The girl didn't move, didn't blink, just raised one hand and pointed behind Claire into the house. Claire turned slowly and saw muddy footprints leading from the kitchen to the hallway, up the stairs. When she looked back, the girl was gone. She wanted to run, but something inside her made her move forward instead. Maybe it was the nurse in her, the instinct to help. Maybe it was shock. She followed the prints upstairs, every creak of the steps sounding like a scream. The footprints led to the guest room, the one she hadn't opened in months. The doorknob was cold when she touched it. She pushed the door open. The smell hit first, wet, dirt, and decay. Then the sight. The letter, sitting neatly on the bed, reopened. The wax seal melted away like it had never been there. On the paper, new words had appeared under the printed message, written in dark ink that still glistened. "We took her because you left her." Claire's breath stopped. Her knees almost gave out, because she knew exactly who her was. 10 years earlier, she'd been in Eders in another town, a car accident. Halloween night. A young mother and daughter brought in after a collision with a drunk driver. The mother didn't make it. The little girl was in critical condition, begging for help, whispering for someone to stay with her. Claire remembered that night. She'd been overworked, overwhelmed, and when her shift ended, she'd gone home, leaving the child alone in recovery. By the time she came back, the girl had flatlined. No family came. No one claimed the body for days. Claire had buried that memory deep, telling herself there was nothing she could have done. But now, staring at those words, she realized someone hadn't forgotten. Her phone buzzed again. Another picture. The guest room. But now, in the photo, the little girl was standing behind her, head tilted, eyes black. Claire screamed, dropped the phone, ran downstairs. Every light flickered, bulbs bursting one by one as she moved. She made it to the front door, yanked it open, and the girl was there, inches away, eyes bleeding black tears, whispering, "You left me." Neighbors heard the scream. By the time police arrived, Claire's front door was wide open. The TV was playing static again. On the wall, written in dirt, were 4 words. "She is with us." Claire was never found. Only her phone remained on the floor, screen cracked, still recording. The last frame of the video showed her living room, and the faint silhouette of a child's hand pressed against the lens before it cut to black. They say every year since then, around Halloween, the same house gets a new owner, and each one receives an envelope sealed in red wax before the end of October. None have stayed past the 31st, and yet the mailman swears he's never delivered a thing. By the next Halloween on the other side of the country, a man named Dennis lived in a trailer on the edge of an abandoned amusement park, the kind of place that looked like time had rotted it from the inside out. He wasn't supposed to be there. The land was closed off, condemned after an accident years before. But Dennis had been a security guard most of his life and needed a place to hide from himself more than from anyone else. He drank too much, talked too little, and had one rule: never work on Halloween. It was the night his wife and son had died in a house fire 5 years earlier, and every October he vanished off the grid with nothing but whiskey and regret. That year, though, the company that owned the park called him in with a desperate offer: double pay for a single night of patrol. He didn't want to say yes, but he did. And when he arrived, the sky was already bruised with purple clouds and the Ferris wheel loomed like a skeleton against it. The sign still read Happy Hollow Park, but half the letters had fallen. The wind moaned through the rusted rides like a child humming through cracked teeth. He walked the perimeter first, flashlights sweeping across broken fences and graffiti-covered concession stands. The smell of rust and wet leaves filled the air. He told himself it was just another shift, that ghosts were for stories, Not from men who'd already lost everything. But around midnight, the power flickered. Somewhere deep inside the park, an old calliope began to play on its own soft, distorted like it was underwater. Dennis froze. The music was coming from the carousel, the one that had been shut down since the fire that killed 2 kids there in 1997. He knew the story. A spark from faulty wiring, flames racing through the wooden horses before anyone could escape. He'd read the report. He told himself the sound was wind, metal grinding. But then the lights on the carousel flickered to life-dim bulbs glowing one by one until the whole thing spun slowly, creaking, as if welcoming him. Not funny, he muttered, thinking some local punk had broken in. He walked toward it, boots crunching gravel, flashlight beam trembling. The horses turned, each one charred black, their eyes empty sockets. The mirrors along the center pole reflected him a dozen times, each reflection a little off, one smiling when he wasn't, one turning its head when he didn't move. He stepped closer. The music slowed, warped, voices whispering beneath it now, faint children's laughter blending with the mechanical tune. And then he saw her. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on one of the horses. Blonde hair, white dress, no shoes. She was humming the carousel's tune perfectly in sync. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice rough, heart pounding. The girl turned her head, and for a second her face flickered, one moment smooth and human, the next burned, half melted like wax. "Have you seen my brother?" she whispered. Dennis froze. He knew the story of the victims, a brother and sister trapped in the fire. Only the boy's body had ever been found. He swallowed hard. "This isn't real," he said, backing away. But the girl slid off the horse, her bare feet leaving blackened prints on the metal floor. "He's still here," she said. "We all are." Lights went out. The carousel screeched to a stop. In the darkness, Dennis could hear footsteps circling him, small, quick, too many to count. He swung his flashlight around wildly, catching glimpses of shapes darting between the horses, children's faces twisted in silent screams, burned hands reaching out. The music box voice whispered again, close to his ear, "You were supposed to watch him." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I wasn't here. I wasn't..." But then the voice changed. It wasn't a child's anymore. It was his son's. "Dad, why didn't you come back?" The flashlight fell from his hand. The beam landed on the ground, catching the reflection of something shiny, his old badge. He hadn't worn that badge since the night of the fire, but there it was, scorched, his name barely legible. He knelt to pick it up, and the instant he touched it, he wasn't in the amusement park anymore. He was standing in his old living room, the one that had burned. Everything around him flickered between flame and shadow. His son stood by the doorway, clutching a melted toy truck. His wife was on the couch, face hidden by her hair. Smoke filled the air. Dennis shouted, I tried to save you." But his voice sounded small, like a recording underwater. The boy's eyes were gone now, replaced by dark pits. "You left us," he whispered. Then the room folded inward. The sound of collapsing beams, the roar of fire, and Dennis woke on the ground, back in the park, gasping, skin cold with sweat. The carousel was silent again. Everything looked normal. His watch said 3:33 a.m. He stumbled to his truck, shaking, threw his gear in, and sped off. The next morning, another guard found the place empty. Dennis's truck sat by the gate, still idling. The door was open. On the seat was his badge, melted, and a single toy truck black with soot. When police checked the cameras, they saw something impossible. At 3:33 a.m., the carousel had lit up again, and a shadow matching Dennis's height climbed onto it. As it spun, the shadow split in two, one adult, one small child, both vanishing as the lights went dark. The next night, a local kid snuck in to film a YouTube video. The carousel turned on again, and in his footage still online, blurred and grainy, you can see a man's shape standing among the horses, holding a child's hand, turning slowly as the music plays. The timestamp on that clip? Every year, the same, 3:33 a.m., October 31st. They say if you go near the park on Halloween and the wind is right, You can hear the carousel tune drifting through the trees, followed by a man's voice whispering, "Stay with me this time." The night air was colder than it should have been for late October, and every sound carried farther than it should. Somewhere out beyond the rows of dimly lit houses, something moved, a presence that was neither man nor shadow, slipping through the same neighborhoods where 3 stories had already been whispered, retold, and dismissed as coincidence. But Halloween has never been a night for coincidence. In each story, there had been a moment the survivors never spoke about. A flicker in a mirror, a glimpse of a tall shape reflected in a window, a whisper too faint to place. None of them had compared notes, of course. They lived in different towns, different years even, but each one had described the same sensation just before everything went wrong. The feeling of being watched from somewhere they could not name. The first had heard footsteps on a roof that led nowhere. The second had felt breath on the back of his neck in an empty forest. The third had opened the door to silence and found a mask lying at her feet that hadn't been there a second before. None of them noticed that the air temperature dropped the same way, or that the clocks in their homes paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the figure to step through. Some say it began in the late 1800s when a small town tried to ban Halloween entirely. They said the celebration drew something in, a collector of moments, feeding on fear like air. The townspeople burned their decorations, destroyed their costumes, refused to tell stories. That year, no one disappeared, but the next Halloween brought a shadow that lingered on the walls of every home. And it has never left since. By the time the first story unfolded, the figure had already learned to travel through fear itself. When someone told a scary story and another person truly believed it, a door opened. It didn't need a name. It only needed to be remembered. Every scream, every retelling, every nervous laugh in the dark made it a little stronger. It became the space between one breath and the next, a pause between the words of a frightened narrator. Some listeners say that if you play the 3 recordings one after another, you can hear something behind the storyteller's voice, a faint static that isn't part of the sound mix. Others swear the static forms words, whispering names that don't appear in any script. A few have tried to clean the audio and upload it again, but each version carries the same pulse, the same low throb like a heartbeat under the music. And every Halloween, just before midnight, the heartbeat stops for exactly 1 second. That's when the figure moves. It doesn't kill. It collects. Fear, laughter, disbelief, all of it is energy. And it uses that energy to cross into new stories, new homes, new screens. When the survivors of those earlier tales finally began to speak to one another through online forums, through interviews, through late-night messages, they noticed something else. Each one had dreamed of the same man, tall, cloaked, featureless except for 2 pinpoints of orange light where eyes should be. In the dream he never spoke. He just watched. And each dream ended with the same sound. Knocking. 3 slow knocks on wood. No one had ever described the house. It changed depending on who was dreaming. For one, it was her childhood home. For another, it was the cabin where he'd last seen the missing friend. For the last, it was an apartment hallway where the lights flickered and never quite went out. But the knocking was always the same. It took them years to realize the figure wasn't haunting a place, it was haunting a pattern. Every story told in fear, every video watched too closely, was another open window. When one survivor finally gathered the courage to speak publicly, the lights in his studio blinked 3 times in the middle of recording. He thought it was a power surge until he checked the footage and saw that the clock on the wall hadn't moved during those blinks. That's when he stopped editing and started praying. By the time he uploaded the file to the internet, the static was louder. His microphone caught a voice behind his own whispering, "Don't stop." Viewers assumed it was an effect, some clever mix to make the story scarier. But one listener, someone who'd heard the older tales, recognized the voice. It was the same tone that had been heard in the background of a different story years earlier. The figure doesn't care about belief anymore. It exists in the act of listening. The more people hear, the more space it has to move. Sometimes it stands just behind whoever's narrating, just out of frame. Other times it appears reflected in a window, in a blink between cuts. You've seen it before. You just didn't notice. Some say the figure has a purpose, to remind humans that fear keeps them alive, that courage means nothing without something to test it. Others say it's older than memory, drawn to stories the way a moth is drawn to flame. But there's another theory whispered in those circles that trade ghost recordings and forbidden tapes. The figure isn't real at all until you start to wonder if it might be. That wondering is the door. Now, as this final voice fades, as you sit there with the sound of your own breathing louder than before, ask yourself how many times you've checked the dark corners of your room tonight. Notice how the air feels still. Listen closely, not for the story, but for what's underneath it. There's a pulse there, faint and slow, almost like a heartbeat waiting for your next breath to sync with it. If you can hear it, that means it's close enough. The three who survive still sometimes write messages online, warning others never to tell their stories aloud on Halloween night. But every year someone does. And every year, one new story appears, another true account, another whisper passed to a friend who swears they've felt eyes on them in the dark. The figure doesn't appear to everyone. It only visits those who keep listening after the sound fades. It's in the pause between this line and the next. And if you're still here, still listening, it already knows your name. So when you go to sleep tonight and you hear a faint knock, maybe from the wall, maybe from your window, don't open your eyes too fast, because the moment you do, the story begins again. And remember, the more you listen, the closer it gets.